Martin, are you equivocating this evening over the condemnation of the killings of the two RUC officers in Lurgan today?
Well, I'm very saddened that two RUC members have lost their lives.
You are equivocating over condemning them?
Well, my position is that I am prepared to do more than condemn. I am prepared to work with others to try and put in place a credible and meaningful process of peace negotiation.
Well, if you're prepared to do more than condemn, are you prepared to... Can we therefore infer that if you're prepared to do more than condemn, you're prepared to condemn?
Well, my position is that I'm prepared to do more than condemn, because over the course of the last 27 years, people have been condemning right, left and centre, and
but so have you, Crowd. You have been condemning things right, left and centre as well. I did a calculation of the number of motions at your RTE last year, and you condemned, I think about 30 of the motions condemn one thing or another. How come you can't bring yourself to condemn the atrocious killing of two people today?
Well, I haven't condemned anybody.
You did, Martin. You yourself moved several of the motions.
Could you tell me which one?
I don't have them in front of me now, but I was at the RTE.
I know you don't have them in front of you because I didn't condemn anyone at the RTE. Now, the position is this here. We can spend the rest of this interview talking about condemnation.
All right, let's get on with it.
It will resolve absolutely nothing, and you know that better than I do.
But
what we have to do is recognise that we have a very serious and a very dangerous situation. And you should also recognise that I have been one of those people within republicanism over the course of the last number of years who have tried to remove the danger, who have tried to replace the danger and the death and the killing with meaningful peace negotiations. Negotiations which I have not been allowed into by successive British governments, against the background of having a democratic mandate which represents up to 45% of the nationalist people. Those are the issues that we have to be dealt with. How do we put in place a credible and meaningful process of peace negotiations against the background of a completely peaceful atmosphere?
But Martin,
that's the task facing both the British government, people like myself, John Hume, the new Taoiseach in Dublin. We all have to have a shared responsibility in putting all of that together.
Martin, this is just for the birds. The first thing that has got to be done is that people who are killing other people in Northern Ireland have got to stop doing so. Everything else is secondary.
Well,
everything else hardly means anything.
I want to see that, Vincent.
But why?
I want to bring that up.
Why don't you get your friends in the IRA to stop them? I would like to see that happen
tomorrow.
Why don't you get your friends in the IRA to stop them?
Because if I called on the IRA to stop them...
I didn't say call on them. Why don't you get them?
Right. Do you think I can get them on my own?
I don't know, Martin.
No, well, I tell you, Vincent, I can't get them on my own. The only people who can get the IRA to stop is the British government putting in place real and meaningful peace negotiations. I have been working with John Hume, Gerry Adams, John Bruton, and everybody else for the last number of years.
Martin,
and you know better than I do that our route to the negotiating table was blocked right, left and centre by a British government and unionist parties which were not interested.
Being blocked right, left and centre by the IRA murdering people since February of last year.
Well, there's no point in fighting with me about that, Vincent. I am not killing anybody.
Well, I don't know. John Bruton said today that he believed that the leaderships of Sinn Féin and the IRA were the same, thereby inferring that you, for instance, are a leader of the IRA.
Well, he's totally and absolutely wrong. And John Bruton is one of those people over the course of the last number of years who abysmally failed the peace process. John Bruton was the person who provided the British government with their best excuse not to negotiate by supporting their demand for decommissioning.
No, that's not true.
At the beginning of 1995, which allowed the British government to strangle the process for the remaining 18 months. John Bruton is the Taoiseach who refused to meet with the president of Sinn Féin, Gerry Adams, and the leader of the SDLP, John Hume.
Martin, with due respect, Martin,
John Bruton is the Taoiseach who hadn't got a baldy notion about the peace process.
Just a minute, Martin. Let me get in. Don't make speeches.
And his comment in Cork about the effing peace process, I think, shows that up to be true.
Martin, the people who gave the best excuse to the British government for not negotiating with Sinn Féin were your friends in the IRA, who murdered people at Canary Wharf and been murdering people since then.
Listen, Vincent, in the history of the politics of the north of Ireland, the British government have done their fair share of murdering, as have the Loyalists.
Nothing compared with the IRA.
And no British minister that I have ever heard on a radio programme with you, or indeed with many other journalists, is subject to the tirade of abuse that you're trying to throw at me tonight.
Well, I'm not suggesting a tirade of abuse.
No unionist politician that I have ever heard in your programme was subjected to the tirade of abuse that I've been subjected to tonight. And I think what we have to ask for here is fair play. The reality is...
Martin, what do you expect? Your friends have murdered 2 people in the streets of Lurgan today.
Well,
your friends have done so. And you're closely allied to the people who've done so.
But I didn't kill them, and I am trying to bring about...
But Martin, it's very hard for us to believe that you have no connection with the IRA.
So are we not going to have an interrogation of Martin McGuinness?
We're not going to have an interrogation. And even if we have, so what? By compared with what was done to the 2 policemen today, it's just a trivial issue.
But I mean, what you have to ask yourself is whether or not all of this is going to contribute to real and meaningful dialogue.
Okay, how are you going to get the IRA to stop murdering people?
Hold on a wee second. There is a task, and one of the tasks is, of course, to get the IRA to stop. It's also to get...
That's the first task.
No, it's not the first task.
It's the first task, and by far the most important task.
It's an equal task.
No, it isn't
getting the British Army to
No,
stop.
it isn't an equal task.
With getting the loyalists... Well, you see that? I think that says more about you
than
it says about me.
How is that?
Well, because
we all know that if the IRA were stopped, everything would fall into place.
I am speaking to you from a city, where over 8,000 plastic bullets were fired at the young people of the city in the course of the last year, where many dozens of those young people were critically wounded by the British Army. I never heard you crying about it. I am speaking to you from a city where Dermot McShane was run over by a British Army vehicle. I never heard you crying about it. I am speaking to you from a city where injustice has been heaped upon injustice, and the people that I represent, up to 45% of the nation's people, have been excluded by the British government. Not just
can we get on to another subject? Can we get
foundation of the...
Can we get on to another issue?
I know you don't like to talk about this, Vincent.
Well, Martin, it's so easy to respond to that thing. You set yourself up. But anyway, can we get on to another issue?
Yes, change the subject now.
Yes.
When you've lost the argument.
You think that settles the argument? What you've just said, the shooting of plastic bullets somehow justifies the murder of 2 policemen.
I am not
Let's just move on from that.
Hold on a minute.
It's such a trivial point. Let's just move on.
I can't let you move on because I am not going to allow you to put words into my mouth. I did not justify the killing of anyone.
Okay, then it's somehow the equivalent. There's an equivalence there.
Vincent.
All right, you didn't justify it. Right, I was wrong. Withdraw that. I apologise. It's an equivalence.
Vincent, please apologise to me.
Okay, I apologise. But, however, you suggested there was an equivalence, which is ridiculous. Anyway, let's get on to another issue.
Hold on a minute, Vincent. No, I'm not going to let you go on, because there is an equivalence with young nationalists being killed and injured by the British Army.
When were last nationalists killed by the British Army?
Dermot McShane was run over by a British military vehicle and killed 11 months ago. Dozens and dozens of young people were critically wounded by plastic bullets in this city. I visited them in hospital. I didn't see any of you people up with your microphones. I didn't see any TV crews. I didn't see anybody interview their mothers or their fathers.
Okay. I disagree with you. I disagree with the suggestion of the equivalence there. But let's move on. Because there has been a suggestion this evening that the talks that you've had with British government officials at Stormont over the last while have been deeply disappointed that you haven't got the kind of assurances regarding Sinn Féin participation in all-party talks that you feel is necessary. Is this so?
Well, it's fair to say that the second meeting which we held with British government officials was a disappointing meeting. But at the same time, I believe that meeting occurred at a time whenever there was a limbo situation. The election in Dublin wasn't over, and it was my feeling right throughout the course of that meeting that the British government were stalling until such times as that situation clarified itself. And of course, it is now in the process of clarifying itself. I always had the hope that there would be a further meeting with the British government, and that further meeting could yield dividends. And I'm very, very saddened tonight to hear that the British government have, for this moment anyway, decided that the meetings will not take place. Of course, I also remind you that I am the one person in Sinn Féin who has been in almost constant contact with representatives of the British government.
And a heated exchange there.